Just off the coast of Nagasaki in Japan, there's this island. And honestly, it looks like something straight out of a post-apocalyptic movie. Just this fortress of decaying concrete, totally and completely abandoned. Its nickname is Gunkanjima, which means Battleship Island, and you can totally see why from a distance. But when you get up close, it's a ghost city, wrapped in this huge concrete seawall, just bracing against the waves day in and day out. And for decades, typhoons have just relentlessly hammered this place. They've stripped away walls, revealing these eerie, hollowed-out shells of a life that's long been forgotten. I mean, think about it. Thousands of people used to live and work here. Now, nothing. Just the sound of the wind and the crashing waves. So that's the big question, right? What is this place, and why is it so completely empty? Well, today we're going to dive into the incredible story of Hashima Island. Okay, so that nickname, Gunkanjima, or Battleship Island, it comes from its silhouette, right? All smokestacks and high-rise buildings. But this was no warship, not even close. For almost 100 years, this place was an absolute engine of industry, a powerhouse built on a massive fortune of coal that was buried deep, deep beneath the sea. So to really get why it's so empty now, we've got to rewind. We have to go back to a time when it was, believe it or not, one of the most crowded places on the entire planet. Just this tiny island fueling a whole nation's massive ambition. All right, check out this timeline. It really shows Hashima's just explosive growth. Japan was in this monumental push to modernize. And to do that, it needed resources, tons of them. And Hashima? Oh, it delivered. In just a few decades, it went from being a barren rock in the ocean to a totally state-of-the-art mining facility. The undersea coal from here literally powered Japan's industrial revolution. So get this. By 1959, this was the number of people living on that tiny island. Over 5,000 residents. And all of them were packed into just 16 acres. To put that in perspective, that's smaller than your average shopping mall. I mean, can you even imagine living in a city where literally every single inch of land was built on? It was one of the most densely populated places in all of recorded history. Just incredible. So to make this all work, Mitsubishi didn't just build a mine. No way. They built an entire self-contained vertical city. And you can see it right here. Everything was stacked on top of each other. We're talking high-rise apartments, a school, a hospital, even restaurants, shops, a movie theater, a pachinko parlor, the whole shebang. A whole community packed into this one concrete block. But, this picture of a bustling, modern community, it isn't the whole story, not by a long shot. Because as Japan's empire expanded into World War II, the island's so-called progress came at a truly terrible human cost. Yeah, to meet the massive demand for coal to fuel its war machine, Japan turned to forced labor. Hundreds and hundreds of Korean and Chinese civilians, and prisoners of war too, were brought to Hashima completely against their will. Their lives were basically considered expendable, all for the sake of production. And this slide, wow, it really shows the two completely different realities on Hashima. On one hand, you had the Japanese miners and their families. They lived in modern concrete apartments. They had access to schools, cinemas, a real community. But then, in stark contrast, you had the forced laborers. They were shoved into these cramped, run-down quarters and forced to endure just brutal conditions day in and day out. The words of survivors, like this quote from Kim Hyung-sub, who was taken to the island back in 1943. I mean, they just paint this horrifying picture of near starvation. He said, "I can't explain how much we suffered. Eating was the biggest problem. That's what they called food for us." Just heartbreaking. And if you think that's bad, deep down in the undersea mines, the conditions were even more horrific. We're talking over 1,000 meters below sea level. The workers toiled for 12-hour shifts in this suffocating heat and humidity. Hundreds died from accidents, from pure exhaustion, from malnutrition. And, being surrounded by the ocean, Hashima was a prison you just couldn't escape from. Some tried to swim for it, but they never made it. So, how did this all come to an end? Well, after the war, the mine actually kept operating for a while, but a huge global shift in energy meant its days were numbered. The world was changing,
Petroleum was becoming the new king of energy, and because of that, coal mines all across Japan started shutting down. Those rich undersea veins of coal that had made Hashima so incredibly valuable, well, they just weren't profitable anymore. And when the end came, it came fast. In January 1974, Mitsubishi announced they were closing the mine. And get this, within just 3 months, the entire population was gone. Everyone. They left everything behind. Their apartments, the school, the movie theater, an entire city just instantly silenced, frozen in time. For decades after that, the island was completely off limits, forbidden. But in recent years, it's actually become a tourist destination. And maybe more importantly, it's become the center of a really fierce international debate.
This whole controversy really blew up in 2015. That's when Japan applied to have Hashima listed as a UNESCO World Heritage Site, just celebrate its role in the country's industrial revolution. But South Korea and China immediately objected. They argued, hey, wait a minute, you're completely ignoring the history of forced labor here. So, to get that UNESCO designation, Japan made a promise on the world stage. They said, and this is a quote, that they were prepared to take measures that allow an understanding that there were a large number of Koreans and others who were brought against their will and forced to work under harsh conditions. They even pledged to create an information center to remember the victims. But then, almost immediately, Japan's government seemed to walk back that promise. The foreign minister at the time came out and argued that the phrase forced to work doesn't actually mean forced labor under international law. It's a distinction that critics, of course, say completely denies the reality of what actually happened on that island. And that right there brings us to the very heart of the issue today. You've got these two competing narratives. On one side, you have the industrial heritage view, which paints Hashima as this proud symbol of Japan's industrial might, but, and this is key, it focuses only on the period from the 1850s to 1910. Then you have the other side, the forced labor view, which demands that the full history be told, especially the wartime atrocities of the 1940s. It's really a conflict over memory itself. So Hashima Island still stands there today, this powerful, silent monument. But what does it stand for? A marvel of engineering? Or a site of immense human suffering? That remains deeply, deeply contested. And it leaves all of us with a really difficult question. When a place has two such starkly different pasts, how should history remember it?